Chapter 4 is going to be the first relatively easy map in the game, and while I won't say this map is completely free, it can certainly cause problems if you get an unlucky combination of enemy skills on Lunatic Plus. It's by far the easiest chapter of the early game, and it is pretty much free on Lunatic and below. The most important concept for Chapter 4 is to keep an open mind and be flexible with your strategy. This map is a near mirror image on the left and right side, but we can use that to our advantage. Due to the nature of Lunatic Plus, the enemies are going to roll randomized skills, but this also means that there will be slight differences between the left and the right flank as early as turn 1. You need to match up your characters with the enemies that they are good at fighting. The same kind of logic is used in RPGs like Pokemon and Persona. The fun thing about Lunatic Plus is that it essentially fully randomizes the enemy composition, and so you have to have enough game knowledge to figure out who is strong against which enemy. There's no way to copy someone else's homework. There's no way to memorize the correct answer. Your problem-solving skills are tested every single time you go into battle. I like to check the enemy skills and then adjust my starting positions and my opening moves based on that information, rather than having Frederick go to the left and Robin go to the right every single time. If the enemy on the left has Pavis, I'll send Robin or Miriel to fight him with a tome. If the enemy on the left has Aegis, I'll send Frederick to fight him with a physical weapon. If a specific enemy has counter, I like to set up and position my units so that on the next turn, I can allow the enemy to get close and then surround them and chip them down with 2 range attacks. If every enemy on the map has counter, okay, I'll just reset in that case, but that rarely happens. This is truly the first map in the game where you can go in blind, not needing to reset for enemy skills, and have a reasonable chance of winning as long as you make the right moves every turn. This is our first and last breath of fresh air before things get really, really difficult. That means we can finally take a break and not stress ourselves out too much with enemy phase and player phase dynamics. We don't need to spend 5 minutes talking about which exact tile Frederick or Robin is going to stand on in the first turn, and, well, that is true. But this chapter is also the first time you have access to every meta strategy available in the base game. You can buy tonics, you can buy replacement weapons, you can forge your weapons. This can allow you to give a power boost to specific characters you favor, and this makes training your project units significantly more viable, while also making it easier for your best characters, like Frederick, to hit specific damage benchmarks. Even the Anna shop is now available, if you get lucky. But in terms of guaranteed shopping, I recommend immediately buying 3 strength tonics and 3 defense tonics each. You can even buy a few extra defense tonics. They are useful in the long run, and unfortunately, if a Risen shows up and blocks this shop, you won't be able to buy them later on very easily. This is the only shop in the game that sells defense and strength tonics, so it's better to get them now while you know you can. A forged Winds Tome, Bronze Axe, or Bronze Bow is a good investment even right now. The Winds Tome and Bronze Bow will deal 3 times effective damage against wyverns in the coming chapters, so each point of might you forge is actually worth up to 3 times as much its value. Don't go overboard, but bronze weapons are cheap to forge, so 1 or 2 extra might can actually be worth it. If you're going to end up forging this thing later on anyway, it's better to just forge it now, that way you have it right now. A forged bronze axe in particular is going to give Vaike a more accurate option on turns when you need to guarantee a hit more than you need him to deal damage. Also, because axes are one of the best weapon types in the game, along with bows and tomes, forging these weapons now can be a solid long-term investment for your other units. You see, eventually Vaike is going to get to the point where he doesn't need to use this forged bronze axe, but you also haven't broken it yet because it had 45 charges. When you switch Robin over to an axe using class, or you switch Gaius over to fighter, or you switch Donal over to fighter, that character is going to have a forged bronze axe available, which is going to make it easier to train them out of E rank in axes. The basic idea of why forged weapons are so good is because they're not committed to a single character. You can invest money now, use the item with a temporary character to improve your consistency early on, and then you'll still be able to pass the item over to a long-term project unit later on. The forged bronze bow is a great example of this. It is especially useful if you're planning to run one of my favorite builds, Archer Crom. Virion can use the forged bronze bow right now to great effect. Even though he's a character I would normally bench around chapter 6 or 7, it makes Virion significantly more useful in chapter 5 and chapter 7. And later on, Crom will immediately have access to an E rank bow that is about as powerful as an iron bow. This makes training Archer Crom a bit less painful while he's building his weapon rank. Anyway, the tutorial is over, and the game is finally open to us. We have access to the full sandbox of Fire Emblem Awakening. There won't be any more new skills to learn about, and we've already been introduced to all of the mechanics in the previous chapters. Chapter 4 is also significantly the first time you need to make a serious decision about who to bring with your limited deployment slots. As a result, this is the moment where you need to seriously begin thinking about your long-term goals and team building strategy. At the highest level of play, you should have already been planning this as early as Chapter 2, Chapter 1, or even the prologue. Honestly, even the moment you created Robin is significant in the development of your overall team. However, it is possible to go into the game without a specific plan, rely on Frederick to carry you through these early chapters, and then begin building your team on Chapter 3, just based on how you feel at the time. You're not overly committed and you're not too far behind yet. But after this point, the characters you choose to bring to Chapter 4 should all be picked for a specific reason. Even if your goal is to train Frederick, Robin, and Chrom exclusively, this is still an important choice. You need to fill the remaining 3 deployment slots with characters who can make the map easier while not stealing experience away from Frederick and Robin. And then you can still bench those characters after. Or if you want to train Miriel or Sumia, for example, you need to deploy them here and make sure that they get some experience in this map. You probably should have also gotten them some experience in Chapter 3 as well. I've been talking about meta strategy for a while already, while letting this game footage play in the background. But let's shake things up before we talk about team building. Let's go back to the start, and I'm going to walk you through the specifics of this map. In this example, I was playing the game on stream, and I had just claimed my Renown rewards. This was my first attempt at this map, after getting my Renown items. I'm going to deploy Chrom, it's mandatory. Frederick for dealing with tough enemies safely. Lisa's here for healing. Sumia I brought because I want to train her. Robin as a tactician is my best method for subverting Pavis Plus. And I'm bringing Virion as well. Having an archer will give me a second option for defeating enemies with Pavis Plus and takes a little bit of pressure off of Robin. Coincidentally, Virion also gives good physical support to Frederick and Robin, so he can serve as a pair-up supporter when his attacks aren't needed. I will bench Virion later on in this run, and I already know that I'm going to do that, but it's totally fine to rely on him for now because he can take actions which won't steal experience from other characters. The Glass Sword is going to be used by Robin if they get into a situation where they must defeat an enemy in a single hit. Glass weapons are extremely powerful early on, but they become less important over time. So don't worry about the small number of uses and don't be scared of breaking them. If you need to use it, use it. This enemy on the left has Luna Plus and counter, so there is nobody who can fight him safely in melee on enemy phase. They will take reflected counter damage and heavy damage from Luna Plus, so the best option here I think is to chip him with ranged attacks. Chrom's pair-up allows Frederick to attack twice, and because we got Luna on both attacks, the enemy is defeated immediately. Keep in mind, if Chrom used a dual strike, we would also defeat the enemy without triggering Luna, and we even had a tiny chance to crit them. This is a strategy known as stacking proc effects. You might not be able to guarantee a specific outcome, but you can make it so that so many things have the potential to go right in your favor, there's a really good chance you'll have at least one thing go your way. You'll get a dual strike, you'll get a crit, or you'll get your skill activation. However, in this case, it didn't matter anyway. If the enemy was left alive on low health and he attacked us, our enemy phase attack would have defeated him. And when you defeat an enemy, you don't take counter damage. So this opener was actually 100% safe. But the good luck accomplished two things. It saved us one use of the Orson's Hatchet, and it keeps Frederick on full health. We're using the Orson Hatchet from the early Renown rewards, and I talked about this already in a previous video, so I'm not going to go over it again. But if you're not using Renown items, you can use the Javelin here instead. It's the same exact opener, but it's just less consistent due to the lower damage and lower accuracy. Essentially, you're just forcing yourself to take more resets on average, which to me is not fun. The enemy on the right has Vantage and Pass. This combination of skills is what you typically love to see. You can enemy phase them, and it's almost the exact same as fighting a Lunatic enemy in 9 out of 10 cases. I will have Sumia and Robin pair up here to help build their support. Sumia can potentially dual strike for experience, and Robin is now fast enough to double the enemy. Early game pair-ups allow you to tailor your speed, strength, and defense so that you can guarantee specific speed benchmarks, damage on your attacks, or just enough bulk to survive hits with 1 HP. So really, do not take the pair-up mechanic for granted. It is the most centralizing piece to your strategy in Awakening, and it's also very important in the lore. Sumia did get get some extra chip experience here from a dual strike, which was very nice, and Frederick takes a heavy hit from a mage with Luna, but manages to defeat him on enemy phase. Because we were able to preserve Frederick's health, with a bit of good luck here, we did not need to dodge the attack from this mage. However, standing on this stairway, you can dodge it, and we would have had a higher chance to dodge the axe fighter as well, so always be aware of your positioning and the terrain. Not only were we stacking proc effects offensively, but we were also stacking effects defensively to maximize the chance we would dodge at least one attack. Thanks to our strong aggressive opener, we have a ton of free space available for positioning, and a full turn to set up for the incoming enemies on the next phase. This enemy up here has counter, but he has a 2-range weapon equipped. Enemies like this will almost always prefer to attack in 2-range whenever possible, and we are going to discuss the exceptions to that rule when we get to the next chapter, because it happens a lot in the next chapter. But for now, all you need to know is that 2-range enemies with counter can typically be enemy phased safely. If you're scared, just stand at the edge of their range, so they only have the option for 2-range. However, once you know how the system works, you can easily plan around it. I will have Frederick deal with him on enemy phase, because I want the left side to be open in the future turns, and I need to get rid of him quickly. In the meantime, let's check our group on the right. Fighting this mage will risk an 11% crit chance, but we do have tools to mitigate that risk. Remember, by having our allies stand next to us, we will gain a support bonus. We can attack this fighter from the edge of the mage's attack range, so that on enemy phase, the mage will only be able to attack Robin. In this position, Lisa and Virion could also stand next to Robin. This will reduce the crit chance down to 3%. It's the best we can do, and I feel a lot more comfortable with this opener. I'm also going to trade the Thunder Tome into Robin's hands. This is going to allow them to potentially crit the mage with Thunder while still attacking the fighter with less valuable Fire Tome charges. Virion hasn't fired a single arrow, and yet he's contributing to the battle in several meaningful ways. Lisa needs to move to the left side to heal Frederick, so Robin will not get her support bonus this turn. By keeping Lisa in the middle, she can move to either side as you need her to, at least until Lucina starts moving. But your goal should be to eliminate these enemies before that happens. Sumia gets another dual strike this turn, earning herself even more chip experience, and a Chrobin dual strike allows us to finish off the fighter on enemy phase, which is great for our momentum next turn. This is exactly what we wanted. Now, unfortunately, both of these knights have counter, so we're going to have to use all of the momentum we've gained so far to claw our way to victory. This is a very difficult situation, and I even considered resetting, but it's not impossible to deal with, not even close. So I'm going to show you how you can manage a situation like this. I don't even play perfectly, and I still think I got through it pretty well. Unfortunately, hitting him with the hammer is not going to do enough damage to defeat him with a single attack, but it does hit him hard enough that the reflected damage will take out Frederick in return. By doing some quick math, I discovered that Frederick could hit the enemy with the Silver Lance. He would survive the damage from the enemy plus the reflected counter damage. However, there's another problem. 18 damage plus 18 damage is only 36. The knight is going to survive on 1 HP, and Frederick will end up dealing 36 damage to himself instead of only 18, and he cannot take that amount of damage. So what's the solution here? Well, first, let's get rid of the mage. I decide to back up and enemy phase him one more time. With more allies around Robin, we can potentially reduce the crit chance even further. Again, Virion's job here is going to be to switch Robin to the Fire Tome, because this time we don't need crits, the Fire Tome will be enough to guarantee the kill. Last, I try to find a way to remove the knight right now, but I just couldn't figure out a solution, so instead what I did was unpair Frederick and Chrobin. You always want to do this whenever you don't need to be paired up, because you're going to have more actions available on the next turn. When you defeat this mage, you get a free Thunder Tome with a full 45 charges. I strongly prefer to put this thing into the convoy so that I don't use it accidentally, because I'm going to forge it in the upcoming chapters. By forging a weapon with all 45 charges still available, you get a lot more value out of it in the long term, and this tome in particular is a great option for an early forge. It will represent your highest possible damage output in general encounters, and because the Thunder Tome crits very often, that 1 point of damage you forged, sort of like the way effective weapons work, is sometimes going to be worth 3 points of damage instead of just 1. on. This turn, you can see by checking the enemy attack ranges, we are now able to safely fight one of the knights. He is completely isolated, and none of his allies will be able to back him up this turn. That gives us plenty of room to dispatch him safely. But Lucina is going to start moving very soon, so we cannot keep dragging our feet. We still double this knight without Sumia's speed bonus, so I trade her over to Frederick before attacking. This allows us to bait in a dual strike from Frederick. However, I made a misplay here. I ended up wasting an Orson Hatchet charge. I should have switched Frederick to the hammer, which would have killed this enemy, or even just switch him to the Iron Sword to deal damage without wasting valuable weapon charges. However, we can turn this situation to our advantage. Because the enemy is alive on low health, Chrobin can now defeat him and get a little bit of experience. Don't ask me why I wasted 2 Levin Sword charges here. I have no idea. In this situation, you should absolutely use the Rapier. You can get extra damage by having Frederick pair up with Chrobin and guarantee the kill. I think I was too caught up in the idea of pairing him together with Sumia to help build supports. At this point though, we have a big problem. This short axe fighter is covering a lot of territory, and Lucina has started moving. We do not have many turns left before we get backed up into the wall. To make matters worse, because both knights had counter and we were very slow in defeating them, one knight is still lumbering towards our group. You'll notice here that I deal 33 damage to these knights and they have 37 HP. If I had Vaike with me, I could have him pair up with Frederick to give +4 strength, which would allow him to one-shot these knights and avoid triggering counter. One of the great things about Vaike is that if you are planning to train him for the long-term use, he also provides immediate value in the short term with his great pair-up bonuses. Well, eventually I come up with an idea that takes advantage of the low movement of the knight. Avoiding tunnel vision is key in Lunatic Plus. Remember, the goal is not to defeat this knight. The goal is to defeat all enemies. What we can do is position ourselves to deal with the short axe fighter this turn. This allows us to stay out of range of both Lucina and the knight, and we can deal with the knight later on when conditions are more favorable. I was really hoping to get a dual strike here, but again, I did not. Now we are in an even more dangerous position. Whoever deals with these enemies will be in range of Lucina. That means I must account for her enemy phase attack in addition to whatever else these characters are doing. Even worse, this fighter has a massive range with his short axe. I cannot leave him alive to deal with him on enemy phase, because if I do, he's going to attack and defeat one of my support units. However, the person who defeats this axe fighter needs to be able to survive against Lucina. We do have one thing going in our favor right now. Lucina did not get counter, which makes the benchmarks much less difficult for fighting her. Although she is very fast and she hits very hard, we can do this. I'm going to start by taking the riskiest actions first. This tactic works extremely well in games like Fire Emblem 6, where your characters have low accuracy. As a result, you can have the less reliable attacks go earlier in the turn, and if they happen to hit, that's great. But if they miss, you have plenty of other units available to correct your course. We're going to use the same logic here in Awakening. Robin can attack twice, which gives 2 chances to have Frederick dual strike with the hammer. Again, we did not get the dual strikes, but this is actually completely fine. Again, I already have a backup plan in place. In this battle, I'm really demonstrating how good luck can help you out, but you can create situations where even if you don't get the good luck, you can still have a backup plan ready. You see, I have Virion grab Frederick and move him into the lead position. Now I can attack directly with the hammer. With the chip damage from Robin, Frederick is now able to one-shot the enemy, and he takes no counter damage. Frederick is fast enough to not get doubled by Lucina, so our first enemy is removed, and we have Robin, Frederick, and Virion all in safe positions where they are guaranteed to survive. I just want to point out again that Virion has not fired a single arrow, and yet his contribution to the battle has been so much appreciated. Chrobin is guaranteed to defeat this fighter, but he will need to risk a 6% crit chance from Lucina on enemy phase. At the very least, this is a short map, so if we get unlucky, it will be fast to reset and play the map again. I was willing to take this risk. Lisa can put the silver lance into Frederick's hand. I don't think Lucina is going to attack Frederick, but if she does, I don't want to waste a hammer charge. She can also heal Frederick while she's here. Lisa's ability to passively gain free experience every turn with her staff allows her to snowball snowball into a powerful unit so quickly, and this is something I'm going to showcase in my upcoming team building video. At this point in my run, Lisa was already almost ready for an early promotion, but to do that you require a bit of luck from Anna's shop, so that's not exactly reliable. Anyway, we did not get crit by Lucina, but she still hits really hard, and we chipped her for a measly amount of damage. Frederick is going to need to do a lot of work here. However, before that, it's finally time for Virion to step into the role of leading man and shine, at least for a little bit. He can deal accurate chip damage here, while using the same trick we had Robin and Frederick perform last turn. I calculate their damage so that if Frederick dual strikes against Lucina, she will be alive on low health. This would allow me to potentially give the boss experience to Sumia, Robin, or Chrobin, but again, we did not get the dual strike. We did get quite lucky with Lucina's skills on this attempt, even though we got unlucky with the knights both having counter. Because Lucina doesn't have Vantage, this can allow any character to safely finish off Lucina, even if they couldn't take a single attack from her. However, in this case, it didn't matter. I just have Lisa grab Frederick and then attack Lucina with Frederick. This is going to give him enough experience to reach level 6, and we were rewarded with a solid level up. These extra stats on Frederick are going to make Chapter 5 a lot more reliable. Also, after this chapter, Lonku joins in a cutscene that I skipped. He is an immediately powerful unit who can hold his own in combat, contributes a super valuable pair-up bonus to other characters, and he also has some qualities that are extremely useful in Lunatic Plus style play. On that note, let's talk about team composition. In the future, I'm planning to make an entire video about how to build a good team in the long term, and depending on when you're watching this, that video might already exist. But right now, if you're playing Chapter 4, you need to think about who you're going to use, so I want this video to be available in this guide. I think this video would be a failure as a complete Chapter 4 guide if I didn't talk at least a little bit about what you should be thinking going into Chapter 4 and going into this next set of chapters. First of all, if you want to train Sumia, if you like the things I said about her in the Chapter 3 video, then you need to deploy her right now. She must participate in Chapter 4. It's a valuable chance for her to gain experience and, more importantly, lance rank. We want Sumia to get C rank in lances so that she can use the killer lance. It's almost as good as a silver lance, but it only requires C rank to use, and it even gives you a chance to crit for bailout options. This is the most crucial early game power spike for Sumia, and it's going to make her training go so much easier for you and make your other characters also more consistent when they're fighting alongside Sumia. If you're planning to use Vaike, you must deploy him here. The same thing goes. You cannot allow him to start falling behind in experience. The good thing about Vaike is that if you have the Orson's Hatchet, Vaike can bring it into this chapter to help massively contribute your counter push against the initial wave of enemies. Just remember, if you can slow down for half a turn and conserve 2 or more Orson Hatchet charges, it can often be worth doing that. Your access to 2 range weapons is fairly limited early on, so you need to not waste them like I did in that previous clip. Oh, also, about the Levin sword. Basically, everything that I just said about the Orson Hatchet also applies here, but for Chrobin, Robin, and Lonku instead of Vaike. However, I do want to note it can be tricky to get Chrobin or Robin to see swords before this chapter, so you might not even be able to use this thing yet. It is a very strong weapon in Chapter 6, so make sure that you conserve Levin sword charges to use in the future. 2-range combat is so valuable, especially on a unit that is capable of surviving any one attack from the enemy. Vaike with the Orson Hatchet equipped meets both of these conditions, and as a potential hammer user, he can also help eliminate the knights in this chapter. Having said all that, Frederick's axe rank is good enough to use these weapons, so Vaike is not mandatory. He is worth considering for a deployment slot, even if you aren't planning on training him, just because he can push Frederick into the range where Fred can one-shot the knights with a strength pair-up. Also, if Frederick's strength is still a little bit too low, remember to use a strength tonic. We bought those for a reason. Kellam can be a good option if you have a free slot available, because he's able to increase the defense of your other units, but honestly, with only 6 deployment slots, there's almost never a free slot available, and even if you're planning on training Kellam, his joining level is high enough that he doesn't need the experience from this chapter. You can start training him inside Story 1. Honestly, I find it hard to even make room for Lisa sometimes, despite the fact that her healing is such a convenience in this chapter. Virion and Miriel are valuable characters who can help you deal with any enemies who happen to roll Pavis Plus. Also, like Vaike and Sumia, if you want to train Miriel as a long-term member of the team, you should make space for her here. One thing about Miriel that is very important is this. If you are planning to switch Robin over to a sword-locked class, you are going to lose one of your best anti-Pavis units. You are losing your your most important early game tome user. In that situation, I strongly recommend training Miriel in Chapter 3 and bringing Miriel along to Chapter 4. In the footage you're seeing now, I used a team that did not have Miriel, Virion, or a Tactician Robin. And let me tell you, Chapter 4, Side Story 1, and Chapters 5 and 6 were all extremely brutal, even with the Levin Sword. So much harder than my typical run. This doesn't matter as much on Lunatic, but in Lunatic Plus, it really matters. I made things way harder for myself than they needed to be. Even though the long-term payoff was worth it, I could have easily made this less challenging by planning ahead and getting Miriel ready for these chapters, so I had a unit to defeat the foes with Pavis Plus. If you are interested in hearing more about Miriel as a unit, I have already completed a guide for her character, so go check that out. The last thing I want to talk about here is Robin and potentially using the early second seal on them or saving it for someone else. Now, make sure you have a snack ready and make sure you have some water, because this one is going to take a little while. However, I do recommend sticking around for the rest of this discussion because this is one of the most important decisions that you're going to make in the early game. It is absolutely possible to get Robin to level 10 before this chapter. I've had Robin reclass before going into this chapter, and I've also had them wait longer before doing it. I know both methods are good and both methods are valid. It's ultimately going to depend on what your team composition is going to look like in the long term. So I want to discuss the options and maybe help you get an idea of what you prefer to do. First of all, a really popular choice is to have Robin go into either Mercenary or Myrmidon. If you want to do either of these choices, you should really try to get Robin to see swords and level 10 before Chapter 4, and then reclass them here. Or have them reach level 10 and see swords at the end of this chapter and reclass them at the end, or during the chapter works of course. When you use a second seal, it slows down all future experience gain based on your current level when you used the seal. For that reason, it's important to use it as soon as possible, as soon as you hit level 10 ideally. However, if I understand the rounding correctly in the formula, I believe odd numbers have a bit of leeway here. This means that you could second seal Robin at level 10 or level 11, and it should be the same, but I'm not 100% confident in this statement. It's something that is very difficult for me to test, but what I can say for sure is that the difference is minor either way, so don't sweat over it too much. If Robin starts getting to level 14 or 15, it might be better to give up on the second seal and just wait and use a master seal instead. Going directly into Grandmaster isn't that bad, and at that point the second seal penalty is going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. Master seals do not slow down your future experience gain, and I am 100% confident about this one, and I have tested this one, so I know it's true. Leveling all the way up and using a master seal is a great way to get a lot of extra stats onto a unit. As long as you're happy going into your default master class line, it's a good option. Now, if you are going to use the second seal, let's talk about those class options that I discussed. The value of Myrmidon is that you're going to get Vantage, which in theory could help Robin stay alive in dangerous situations. In order for this one to work, you need to make sure that you can guarantee you're going to have extra second seals early on, which is pretty tough to do. That's because you need to use a build that goes something like this. You start in Tactician, you go into Myrmidon to get Vantage. Then you either go into Dark Mage or Mercenary, which allows you to promote into either Sorcerer or Hero. Combining Vantage with Nosferatu or Soul Access is going to make Robin significantly more tanky. Also, having Hex and Anathema gives you a lot more choices for who to pair Robin with as their long-term support partner. The downside of the Myrmidon path is that it can be extremely difficult to train, and it also requires Robin to take experience that could go towards other units and building them up and making them stronger, while contributing less in the short term. Your early game Robin is going to be weaker, and they're going to be stealing experience from other units. But in the long run, it will make Robin into a nearly unstoppable tank. Even on Lunatic Plus, the Sorcerer build is very reliable. Nosferatu healing triggers before you take counter damage, and this fact is key. It can help Robin enemy face sweep against enemies with counter. Adding Vantage on top of that just increases your survivability even more. It's also possible to run a similar build without Vantage. You just go directly into Dark Mage and then right into Sorcerer. This option is only a little bit less consistent at enemy face sweeping due to the lack of Vantage, but it uses fewer second seals, and to be honest, this early in the game, second seals are in high demand. You're not going to be getting very many of them until much later on. Dark Mage or Mercenary, in my opinion, are the better choices if you're planning to reclass Robin. Dark Mage is going to allow you to keep access to tomes while you continue to train, with a Mercenary or or a Myrmidon Robin build, I highly recommend that you invest into Miriel early on, because without a tome or a bow user, you have effectively no methods for defeating enemies with Pegasus Plus quickly, because Robin is giving up their tome access. Mercenary Robin can work very well as long as you account for this fact. You just need to bring Miriel or Virion or even both to help with that essential player phase removal. Now, on the topic of Mercenary, people really love Arms Thrift, and to be honest, while the skill is useful in the long term and in very specific cases, I think it is massively overhyped. And I have done enough no grinding challenges of this game without using Arms Thrift in plenty of those playthroughs that I can tell you, I have never, and I mean never, ran out of charges or broken an important weapon during a run. This game gives you everything that you need. Having said that, you can still get a lot of value over Arms Thrift, it just slowly builds up value over time. The best return on investment you can get is by giving expensive forged weapons or unique shiny spot weapons to Robin or Gregor for that matter, and because you're not going to break that weapon as quickly, you end up saving a little bit of gold in the long run. Early on, Arms Thrift will also help extend the usage of your Levin sword before it breaks, so I'm not going to discount that contribution. Like I said, I think it's a good skill. I think it's useful. I just think it is very overhyped. Like, some people talk about this skill as if it breaks the game, and personally speaking, I wouldn't even go out of my way to get it. So clearly, we have a difference in how much we value Arms Thrift. For me, the big reason to go into Mercenary is because it allows you to promote directly into Hero. Hero Robin is an extremely strong and consistent build. It's very similar to what Sorcerer Robin does, and you can even go into Sorcerer later, but either way, it's a little bit different in the short term. Hero Robin is going to be naturally faster, and they're also going to be more physically tanky. This is great for enemy phase sweeping, and it will help them keep up with enemy stat inflation in chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. You have enemy phase recovery with Soul, although unfortunately Soul is not 100% reliable like Nosferatu. It's going to heal you before you take counter damage, just like Nosferatu does, so that can be a lifesaver. But the emphasis here is on the word can. With any skill that relies on chance, this could be painful to use if you have that kind of mentality. You're going to remember all of the times that Soul activated when it didn't even matter, and you will especially remember the times that you needed Soul to activate and it just failed to trigger 3 or 4 times in a row, leading to a super frustrating game over. The opportunity cost of 1 second seal isn't too high, but remember that if you start training Vaike right now, he will quickly promote into the Soul tanking position, and unlike Robin, he doesn't even need to use 1 second seal. And he has access to the Orson's Hatchet and the Hand Axe at base, unlike Robin, who needs to be trained specifically to use the Levin sword. And then Robin still needs to train their axe rank again later on. Training the axe rank actually isn't too difficult for an enemy phase sweeper, but it's still something that you want to keep in mind. Usually I make this decision based on Robin's partner. If Robin is going to pair with someone like Saria, Henry, or Miriel, then Robin doesn't need to go into Dark Mage, because he can get the value of Hex and Anathema from his partner. In that case, you can remain in Tactician or even Grandmaster for a while before you decide on Robin's permanent class, or you can go with the Mercenary into Hero option for Robin. However, if Robin wants to pair with a character that isn't one of those 3, it can be useful to consider having Robin go through Dark Mage early on. That way they can give the benefits of Hex and Anathema both to themselves and to their partner. These 2 skills are quite good, and their access is limited. So Dark Mage is one of the ways that you can make really good use of Robin's expanded class set compared to other characters, while also allowing them to keep access to tomes the entire time, which in my opinion is the best use of Robin early on. Robin is basically your only 1 to 2 range character who also has speed and defense. Now, Hex and Anathema aren't the most important skills in the world, I'll admit that, but it's worth a consideration, because in a no-grinding context, due to my personal preferences, I often like to plan my team around my Hex and Anathema users, and Robin is one of the few viable options. Finally, we have to talk about the option that is exclusive to female Robin, Pegasus Knight. This one is often recommended by a lot of the Lunatic guides, and probably some of the Lunatic Plus guides as well, at least for the little information that exists out there. Now personally, I don't run female Robin very often. I find male Robin to be a lot more fun, but basically this second seal option has a lot of similarities to Mercenary. Speed plus 2 is a good skill, but it's not worth going out of your way to get. Relief is also actually kinda good. You'd be surprised at how much value I have gotten out of having a unit with relief flying around the battlefield, staying alive with passive healing, while taking care of key enemies at the edge of combat. But the real value of early Pegasus Robin is, of course, the ability to promote directly into Dark Flyer. This is going to allow you to get Galeforce as soon as possible on one of your best units. Additionally, in the previous episode, I talked about how Sumia can be used to generate multiple units with Galeforce by pairing them together with Chrobin. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention Robin has the same value. Female Robin can easily learn Galeforce before Lucina joins, marry Chrobin, and pass Galeforce down to Lucina and to Morgan. You end up with 3 Galeforce units for the price of 1. Just remember that, like with the Mercenary Hero comparison, we also have the same weaknesses with the Pegasus. Vaike and Sumia already start out as good Axe and Lance users, respectively, and they can promote directly into Hero and Dark Flyer without needing to use a precious second seal. If you want a Dark Flyer Robin, it's going to cost you. You need to use that second seal on them, which means you have 1 fewer to use on your other characters, and then you also need to train Robin with E rank Lances in the pretty underwhelming Pegasus class. Now for me, that's not actually the main reason I avoid early Pegasus on Robin. The main reason I don't love early Pegasus is just because people typically use that when they're pairing Robin and Chrobin together. And I think Chrobin and Robin are individually already very, very good units. And this is going to be tough to explain the way that I want to, so I hope people can understand what I'm trying to say. But basically, marrying 2 top-tier characters together to make a single S-tier pairing on the battlefield is actually less valuable than splitting them up. You can marry them to other characters, and now you have 2 S-tier pairings on the battlefield. Chrobin and Robin don't really need help from each other in order to be valuable units on the team. If you want to marry Chrobin just because you like him, I totally understand. I get that. I'm not saying you shouldn't do this. I'm not saying it's going to make these characters bad. They're still going to be top tier. But there's an opportunity cost, and it can be more economical to split them up. Just as an example, imagine this. You can have Sumia flying around the battlefield with a Chrobin backpack, and have Robin flying around with a Kellam backpack. This generates a ton of value from Sumia and Kellam, which those units simply cannot achieve without Chrobin or Robin's help. Personally speaking, if I was going for Galeforce on Robin, I would go Tactician into Dark Mage into Sorcerer, and then Sorcerer into Dark Flyer. This is going to allow you to keep tome access while you're training and for the entire game. And the only skills you miss out on are Speed +2 and Relief. But you don't have problems with Speed on Robin, and you're not going to really need that much healing. So it's not an issue. And it will make your combat as Dark Flyer much better, because you've already trained for at least 28 levels before you turned Robin into a Dark Flyer, or oftentimes even more. You can still pass Galeforce down to Morgan whenever you're ready, because they do not have a forced join time like Lucina does. In the end, I think you should experiment. Try your own ideas, see what works, and what is the most fun for your style of play. This is not a game that needs to be played in one specific way, no matter what anyone tells you. And my ultimate goal with these videos has always been the same. I want to promote the idea that Awakening is a lot more fun and has way more depth than people give it credit for. And more importantly, encourage people to feel like they can play the game too, not just tell them that I'm having fun playing it. You can have fun, you can be creative, and you're not going to be limited to it using a single derivative strategy. And even if your goal is to just use the single most dominant strategy, you can still do that as long as you're having fun in your own way. Rather than having me tell you exactly which units and which builds you should use, I want to explain to you the concepts for how to build a team. And this allows you to invent your own unique character builds, pairings, and team compositions. Sometime in the next few weeks, I'm going to likely upload the video which exclusively talks about the method that I use for building a team, which skills and classes I find important in the game, especially in a no-grinding context, and which characters really shine due to their unique access to specific class lines or the path that you can take to level them up. Sub to the channel if you'd like to see that, so YouTube will let you know when the next guide is released. And while you wait, you can check out some of my other videos. I have other chapter-specific guides, character-specific guides, and discussions on how gameplay mechanics can give us hints at the story, including ways to discern which pairings might have more favoritism from the developers based on how fast they gain support ranks. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.